When Officer Lena faces certain death, this police canine dog refuses to let her die. In a city plagued by mysterious murders, Lena and her loyal canine, Ace, uncover a deadly conspiracy linked to a shadowy government experiment. As the danger escalates, Ace's extraordinary instincts lead them into a race against time, with the killer always one step ahead. When Lena's life hangs by a thread, Ace takes matters into his own paws, defying all odds to save her. The alley smelled of damp concrete and iron. Officer Lena Mitchell stepped carefully, her boots avoiding the thick pool of blood spreading beneath the lifeless body. The victim, male, mid-30s, lay motionless, his jacket soaked through. No sign of a struggle. No defensive wounds, just a single, precise injury at the base of his skull. Ace, her German shepherd, stood at her side, muscles coiled, breath steady. He was waiting, processing. Then he moved. Lena tightened her grip on the leash. "You got something, Ace?" The dog didn't hesitate. He surged forward, weaving past the other officers, following a scent invisible to human senses. "Mitchell?" Sergeant Connors called after her, but she was already moving. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears as she went through the narrow street, following Ace. He was locked in. His tail high, movement sharp. The streets of the city stretched before them, a maze of alleys, fire escapes, and forgotten corners where crime thrived. Ace led her through a side street, past dumpsters overflowing with yesterday's waste, past windows with drawn curtains. "Backup is 3 minutes out," crackled the radio at her waist. They didn't have 3 minutes. Ace took a sharp turn, leading her through a narrow passage barely wide enough for her shoulders. A rusted metal fence blocked the way ahead. Without pause, Ace launched himself over it. Lena gritted her teeth and followed, landing in a crouch. A parking lot stretched before them, empty except for a single flickering street lamp casting a dull glow over cracked pavement. Ace slowed. His movements changed, no longer pursuing, but searching. Then he stopped. Lena's pulse kicked up. This was it. She reached for her weapon, eyes scanning the lot. Nothing. No suspect. No sign of struggle. No exit points, just an open space where the trail ended cold. Ace circled the area, his ears flicking back in confusion. Lena turned, her gaze sweeping every shadow, every possible hiding place. Her hand flexed over her holster. The killer had been here. And then they weren't. A prickle crept up her spine as she took a slow step forward. Ace stood rigid, nose flaring, head tilting in brief uncertainty. That was wrong. Ace never doubted a trail. Lena lowered into a crouch beside him, brushing her fingers against the ground. The pavement was undisturbed. No footprints. No tire marks. Not even the faintest scuff from a hurried step. Behind her, the approaching sirens grew louder. She keyed her radio. "Mitchell, I lost the scent. We need forensic support." "Copy that," Connors responded. "Stay put." Lena exhaled through her nose. Stay put? As if she had a choice. There was nowhere left to go. Ace let out a frustrated huff, stepping forward, sniffing aggressively. His tail gave a quick flick, irritation. Whatever he had been following had vanished in a way that made no sense. Lena straightened, scanning the lot again. The street lamp above them buzzed softly, casting weak light across the scene. There was nothing to hide behind. Just an abandoned space boxed in by buildings too high to scale without help. No movement. No clues. No way to explain how someone had disappeared into thin air. Ace let out a low, short sound. Not a growl, just enough noise to say he wasn't satisfied with this outcome. "You and me both, partner," Lena muttered. She turned toward the direction they had come from, her mind already running through possibilities. Could there have been a getaway car? A hidden passage? Someone waiting to pull the killer out? The backup units arrived, red and blue lights washing over the lot. Connors stepped out first, his expression set. "Tell me you found something," he said. Lena shook her head. "Ace had the scent. It led us here. Then it was gone." Connors frowned, glancing at the empty space before looking back at her. "Gone? No sign of exit. No footprints. No tire tracks. Nothing." For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic. Then, Connors let out a breath. "That's impossible." Lena didn't respond. It should have been impossible. But it wasn't. The forensic team moved in, taking pictures, sweeping for anything Ace might have missed. Lena stayed back, watching, thinking. Ace sat beside her, his gaze still locked on the empty lot. The trail had ended, and yet it didn't feel like the end at all. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. The killer was here, and then they weren't. Ace's frustration was evident. His nose hovered inches above the asphalt, darting back and forth across the same invisible boundary, paws scratching at the ground as if something should be there. But nothing was. No fabric caught on rusted metal. No footprints leading away. No fibers, no prints, no trail of blood. Lena watched him closely, her fingers gripping the leash. "Come on, bud. Let's try again." She reached into the evidence bag handed to her by forensics, pulling out a piece of the victim's torn sleeve. Ace sniffed, his ears pressing forward. For a brief moment, his muscles tensed, then, without hesitation, he turned back to the same dead-end spot. His tail flicked once, then he pawed at the pavement, nails scraping against concrete. Lena's jaw locked. "You're sure?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Ace sat, panting, nose tilted slightly upward as if waiting for something. Something he expected to be there, but wasn't. "Mitchell," she turned to see Sergeant Connors approaching, his expression unreadable. He held a tablet, the glow reflecting against his weathered face. He handed it to her without a word. She scanned the case file and felt her stomach drop. "This isn't the first time," Connors said, crossing his arms. 4 murders. 4 crime scenes. 4 vanished trails. Lena flipped through the reports. Each victim had been found in a different part of the city, but the circumstances were eerily alike. No struggle. A single, precise wound. No witnesses. No security footage. And most unsettling of all, no past. She scrolled further, eyes narrowing. No family records. No birth certificates. No known connections before the last 5 years. "That doesn't happen," she muttered. "No, it doesn't," Connors agreed. "Someone scrubbed them clean. Completely." Lena exhaled through her nose. "A professional job. Someone powerful, someone careful. This wasn't just murder. It was erasure." A sharp bark pulled her attention back to Ace. He was at the far end of the lot now, his stance alert, his head flicking from side to side. His usual precision had been replaced with erratic behavior, pacing, stopping abruptly, pawing at the crumbling brick wall as if it might give way. Lena tightened her grip on the leash. "Ace, enough," he barked again. Loud, insistent. Then, he turned his head, eyes locked on something in the distance, something she couldn't see. A ripple of unease ran through her. Ace never barked without a reason. She followed his line of sight, but all she saw were shadows. Lena kept her focus on Ace, his posture rigid, breath steady. His gaze remained fixed on the empty space ahead, where nothing but darkness stretched between the broken brick buildings. The sound of approaching footsteps broke her concentration. Connors wasn't alone this time. A woman in an unmarked black suit walked beside him, her expression firm, shoulders squared. "Detective Mitchell," she said, voice clipped. "Agent Kara Hudson, FBI." Lena's grip on Ace's leash tightened. This just became a federal case? Hudson handed over a tablet, her expression neutral. It already was. Lena scrolled through the files, her pulse quickening. Every victim, their entire history, nothing existed before 5 years ago. Different names, different cities, but each profile started at the exact same point in time. These identities were placed, Hudson said. Not lived. Lena frowned. Witness protection? Hudson shook her head. Something bigger. Ace let out a sharp bark. Lena followed his line of sight again, then turned back to Hudson. He's reacting to something. He tracked the scent here, but there's no physical trace. Hudson exchanged a look with Connors before nodding toward the forensics team. Run a thermal. Within minute, a tech operator set up a portable scanner, sweeping the lot. The monitor flickered, lines adjusting as it mapped the environment. Lena leaned in. Her breath caught. A faint heat signature hovered midair, right where Ace had stopped earlier. Not on the ground. Not on a wall. Suspended. Lena's stomach twisted. What am I looking at? The tech hesitated before answering. Something was here. Recently. Hudson took back the tablet, tapping through files. This is the fourth victim, but I promise you, there will be more. She turned the screen toward Lena. A classified report. Redacted lines filled most of the document, but one phrase stood out. Candidates terminated. They were part of something, Hudson said. Something classified. And now someone's erasing them. Lena's pulse hammered. Then we find them before there's another body. Ace jerked the leash forward. His tail stiffened, ears pulled back. His nose worked fast, picking up something fresh. Lena didn't hesitate. She let him lead. They moved through an alley, past abandoned buildings, past forgotten places no one had reason to visit. Then, at the edge of a vacant lot, Ace stopped. Lena reached for her radio, but before she could speak, she saw it afoot, barely visible in the shadows. Another victim. And Ace had found them before anyone else even knew they were gone. Lena crouched beside Ace, her fingers running lightly over his fur as his breathing steadied. He had never led her wrong, and now, standing over another lifeless victim, she knew he wouldn't stop until they got ahead of this thing, whatever it was. Back at the precinct, she pored over files, the flickering screen of her laptop throwing faint light onto her desk. Every record she combed through told the same story. The victims had no past, no family, no connections beyond the last 5 years. Until one detail stood out. A name. Rex. She straightened in her chair, eyes narrowing. A retired police dog. Not just any, Ace's littermate. Her breath slowed as she clicked deeper into the report. Rex had been removed from service due to behavioral inconsistencies. In other words, he didn't behave like a police dog should. He was unpredictable, easily distracted, reactive to things handlers couldn't see. One of the victims, Daniel Clark, had adopted Rex shortly after his dismissal from the force. That was 5 years ago. Lena pulled up the adoption records. Clark had lived in a remote area before moving into the city. His old home, an empty property now, was still listed in the database. She stood, grabbing her gear. Ace, let's go. The drive took less than an hour, but the road stretched on like it wanted her to turn back. The last few miles were nothing but dirt and gravel, overgrown with weeds. When she finally reached the property, the house stood silent. Windows covered in dust, porch steps sagging under their own weight. Ace's ears flicked forward, his nose lifting. Lena clicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. Let's take a look. They moved cautiously up the front steps. Lena pushed the door open, her other hand resting near her holster. The house smelled old, stale air mixed with the faint trace of something chemical, something unnatural. Ace took one step in and froze. His body tensed, muscles coiled tight, but he didn't move forward. Lena frowned. What is it, boy? She tugged the leash lightly, but he resisted. He never resisted. Ace wasn't refusing, he was reacting to something she couldn't sense. Lena let go of the leash. Go on. He didn't move. A noise crackled in her earpiece. Mitchell, you there? She pressed a finger to her radio. Go ahead. The killer struck again. Another victim, same method. Lena's stomach dropped. Where? City limits, the officer responded. But there's more. You're not going to like it. Ace already picked up the trail. Lena's blood ran cold. She turned to Ace. He was staring past her now, toward the back of the house. Toward something unseen. She swallowed hard. Send backup. I think I'm about to find something. She followed Ace as he took careful steps forward, his snout lowering, movements slow and deliberate. He led her past the house, through tangled grass, toward a barely visible opening in the earth. A bunker. She knelt, brushing dirt from the rusted handle before pulling it open. A stale gust of air rushed out, thick with dust and time. Ace descended first, paws tapping lightly against metal. The beam of Lena's flashlight cut through the dark, revealing rows of filing cabinets lining the underground walls. Papers, old and yellowed, covered a metal desk. She stepped closer, scanning the documents. Dossiers. Not just one. Not just the 5 confirmed victims. Over 50 names. 50 erased identities. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't random. This was systematic. A low growl rumbled from Ace's throat. Lena turned, reaching for her gun. Ace's body tensed, his eyes locked on the farthest corner of the bunker. Someone was here. Watching. Waiting. Ace's growl vibrated through the bunker, his teeth bared, his stance rigid. He wasn't looking at the walls, the cabinets, or the files. His focus locked onto empty air, like something unseen had invaded their space. Lena trusted him. She raised her weapon and fired. The gunshot cracked through the underground chamber. The bullet hit nothing until it did. A body staggered backward, materializing from nowhere. The figure flickered like a bad signal, colors shifting as if peeling away from the background. Blood seeped from a wound in the man's side. You were never supposed to find me. His voice was hoarse but steady. Lena didn't lower her weapon. Who are you? The man's fingers twitched against his suit, attempting to press something on his wrist, but Lena took a step forward. Don't. His lips curled slightly. You wouldn't shoot twice. Ace barked, snapping at the man's leg, stopping him from reaching his device. Lena adjusted her stance. Try me. The man exhaled sharply, leaning against the desk. Dar Tessa Green. Lena blinked. Tessa Green is a government scientist. He wiped the blood from his palm onto his shirt. Before I made something the government couldn't control. Lena's eyes flicked to his suit. Optical camouflage. Green nodded. And something else. He motioned toward Ace. You already know, don't you? Lena's grip on her gun didn't falter. Talk. Green inhaled, struggling to stay upright. I was part of a project. We didn't just build cloaking technology. We made something better. We changed perception. Created an advantage that couldn't be replicated. But that's where we failed. Ace's ears twitched. Failed? Lena repeated. Green's eyes flickered toward the bunker's exit. Some things are too dangerous to exist. Lena's patience thinned. You modified police dogs. Green nodded. A handful of them. Not just to track sense. To sense what humans can't. We pushed evolution forward, just enough to give them an edge. He looked at Ace. They see things before we do. Feel things before they happen. Lena's throat tightened. Rex. Green gave a slow nod. One of our best. We had plans, but the program was shut down. Someone stole my work. They turned it into something else, a noise. Ace spun, growling, his body low to the ground. Lena reacted instantly, swinging her gun toward the empty space Ace targeted. Green's voice was quiet. They found us. Ace leaped, his teeth clamped onto something invisible. A shape flickered, glitching against the bunker's dim light. A masked figure fell to the ground, their suit malfunctioning, revealing a smooth black visor and armored plating. The real killer. Lena aimed, ready to fire, but the assassin moved fast. A flash of silver. A blade against her throat. A voice, soft and familiar. "There's no record of me." There never was. Lena's breath caught. The name forced itself out before she could stop it. "Olivia?" The assassin didn't flinch. Ace snarled, his body tense. Lena barely had time to process before Olivia pressed the knife tighter. "This isn't personal," she murmured. Ace didn't wait for a command. His teeth sank into Olivia's wrist, forcing her hand away. The blade clattered against the concrete. Lena grabbed Olivia's arm, twisting it back. "You've been erasing them." Olivia's suit flickered, static racing across the fabric. "No, I've been erasing us." A sickening realization crashed into Lena. Olivia wasn't just covering tracks, she was removing every piece of a past that wasn't supposed to exist. The suit on Olivia's arm beeped. Failsafe. Self-destruct. Ace lunged again, knocking Olivia backward just as Lena fired. The bunker exploded. Heat rushed through the underground chamber, dust clouding the air. Lena barely had time to react before Ace grabbed her jacket, yanking her backward. They crashed against the far wall as the blast consumed the space where Olivia had stood. Silence. Then, a soft whine from Ace. Lena lifted her head. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. The files, gone. The suit, shattered. The assassin, no longer a threat. She exhaled, looking at Ace. "Good boy." The case was over.